The notification arrived at 2:17 a.m., lighting up the dark room with a cold blue glow. I was awake already, staring at the ceiling, listening to the slow ticking of the clock and the distant barking of a dog somewhere down the street. Sleep had been avoiding me for months, ever since the night my life quietly broke apart without making a sound. The message contained only a link. I stared at it for a long time. My first instinct was to ignore it. Unknown links had a way of carrying trouble, and I had already had enough of that. But something about the timing unsettled me. No greeting, no explanation, just a silent invitation in the middle of the night, when defenses are low and memories are loud. I tapped the link. The video opened to a shaky frame, as if recorded by someone unsure whether to speak or remain silent. The camera steadied after a moment, revealing a woman sitting near a window. Streetlight shadows moved across her face. She looked exhausted, her eyes rimmed red, her hair loosely tied as if she hadn't cared enough to fix it properly. Then she spoke. "If you're watching this," she said softly, "it means I finally found the courage to tell the truth." My chest tightened. Her voice felt familiar in a way that made my skin prickle. She swallowed and looked away from the camera, gathering herself. "I don't know how to begin. Maybe I'll start with your name, because I've carried it with me for years." She looked back at the lens. "Adam." My phone slipped slightly in my hand. My fingers went numb. I hadn't heard my name spoken like that in a long time. Gently, carefully, as if it meant something fragile. The woman took a deep breath. "You don't know me. Or maybe you do, but only as a shadow. A mistake. A rumor that was never explained." I felt my heart begin to race, each beat louder than the last. "My name is Sarah," she said. "And everything you believe about your mother's death is incomplete." The room seemed to shrink around me. My mouth went dry. My mother had died when I was 17. Suicide, they said. The word had been passed around in hushed voices, wrapped in pity and shame. People avoided my eyes for months afterward. Some still did. I learned not to ask questions, because every answer hurt too much. On the screen, Sarah's hands trembled as she clasped them together. "I was your mother's closest friend," she said. "And the person who failed her most." My vision blurred. I wiped my eyes angrily, but I didn't look away. "She trusted me with everything," Sarah continued. "Her fears, her regrets, and the truth she was too afraid to tell you." The video paused for a second, then resumed. Her breathing was heavier now. "She didn't want to die," Sarah said, her voice cracking. "She wanted to escape." My throat closed. Memories rushed back without warning. My mother standing at the kitchen sink, staring out the window for too long. Her laughter fading slowly over the years. The way she hugged me tighter on my birthday, like she was afraid to let go. "They said she jumped," Sarah whispered. "But that's not what happened." I stood up without realizing it, pacing the small room. My legs felt weak, unsteady. "What do you mean?" I whispered at the screen. "She left that night because she believed she was protecting you," Sarah said. "Someone threatened her. Someone powerful. Someone who knew things about your father." My father. The man who had vanished when I was 10, leaving behind unanswered questions and a silence so heavy it bent the shape of our lives. "I begged her to tell you," Sarah said, tears spilling down her cheeks now. "But she was terrified. She thought if you knew, they would come for you too." The video ended abruptly. I stood there in the dark, my heart pounding, my mind spinning. The clock ticked on. The world outside continued as if nothing had changed. My phone buzzed again. A new message from the same. My hands shook. "Your father didn't leave because he didn't love us," she said. "He left because staying would have killed us all." My heart slammed against my ribs. My father. The man whose absence had shaped my entire life. The man my mother never spoke of without her eyes clouding. "He discovered things," she went on. "Things powerful men wanted buried. When they threatened him, he ran. Not away from us, but ahead of danger." Her voice broke. I hated him for leaving. I loved him for it too. I pressed the phone closer to my ear, as if that might bring her back. "They came for me after," she said. "They thought I knew where he was. I didn't. Or maybe I did, and I convinced myself I didn't. Fear does that." My chest hurt. Physically hurt. "I made a choice," she whispered. "To stay quiet. To raise you small and invisible. To teach you caution instead of courage." She inhaled sharply. "If that made you feel lesser, forgive me. I was trying to keep you breathing." There was a long pause. Then her voice steadied. I left evidence. Not because I wanted revenge. Because truth has a way of protecting the innocent when lies finally collapse. She named Kareem then. Said he was the only one she trusted to keep it safe. When you're ready, she said, go to him. Decide for yourself who you want to be. Her last words were barely audible. I love you beyond fear. The voicemail ended. I sat there shaking, sobbing into my hands like a child who had finally been allowed to cry. All the years I had blamed her. Blamed myself. Blamed a man I barely remembered. And all this time, fear had been the thread stitching our broken family together. The next morning, I drove to the storage facility. Unit 317 was at the end of a long row, the metal door cool beneath my palm. Inside were boxes, files, a small wooden chest. Kareem was waiting. He looked older than I expected. His hair was gray at the temples, his shoulders heavy with something invisible. She was the bravest person I ever knew, he said quietly. What's in the boxes? I asked. The truth, he replied. Records, documents, names, proof of what your father uncovered. And you? I asked. What was your role? He met my gaze without flinching. I helped him. And when he disappeared, I hid. I told myself I was protecting my family. I told myself silence was survival. His voice trembled. I was wrong. Over the next weeks, my life changed shape. Journalists got involved. Lawyers, old allies of my father emerged from the shadows. With every truth revealed, fear returned, sharp and insistent. There were warnings, threats, a break-in at my apartment that left nothing stolen but everything disturbed. Some nights I wanted to quit. To put the past back in its box and walk away. But then I'd remember my mother's voice. I love you beyond fear. The story broke slowly, then all at once. Names that had once inspired respect now inspired outrage. Power shifted. Lies cracked under the weight of evidence. And somewhere in the chaos, I found myself changing. I stopped shrinking. Stopped apologizing for existing. Stopped mistaking fear for fate. One evening, after it was all out in the open, I returned to my mother's house. The street was quiet, the air warm. I stood in the kitchen where she had spent so many silent hours. I understand now, I said softly. You weren't weak. You were choosing me. The house didn't answer, but I felt something settle inside my chest. Not closure. Something better. Peace. I kept the voicemail. Not as a wound, but as a reminder. Fear may shape us. But love decides who we become. The wind moved through the trees, gentle and steady. I didn't feel abandoned anymore. I felt chosen, trusted, loved beyond fear. As I walked away, I understood something that changed everything. The truth doesn't just break you. If you let it, it rebuilds you stronger than before. The last voicemail from my mother stayed unopened for 3 years. It wasn't because I forgot about it. It lived on my phone like a quiet threat, a red dot I refused to clear. I told myself I wasn't ready, that some messages change things forever, and once heard, they can't be unheard. But the truth was simpler and more cowardly. I was afraid her voice would break me in a way I wouldn't recover from. She died on a Thursday. I remember because Thursdays used to be our day. We'd talk after dinner, when the house finally went quiet and the world felt less demanding. Even after I moved to another city, even after life grew complicated and sharp-edged, Thursdays remained ours. Until the last one. The hospital called me at 6:42 a.m. The nurse spoke gently, the way people do when they already know your life is about to split into before and after. She said my mother had passed in her sleep. Heart failure. Peaceful. That word still makes something bitter rise in my throat. I flew back home the same day. The city looked smaller than I remembered, like it had shrunk in my absence. Or maybe I had grown heavier with years and disappointment. The house stood at the end of the same narrow street, its paint peeling, its windows dull with dust. When I unlocked the door, the smell of her rushed out to meet me. Soap, tea leaves, something warm and familiar that felt like a hand closing around my chest. The funeral passed in a blur of condolences and forced strength. People told me she was proud of me. That she talked about me all the time. That she had a good heart. I nodded and thanked them and wondered how someone could know my mother and still not know the truth about her. Because my mother had been afraid for as long as I could remember. Not the obvious kind of fear. Not screaming or shaking. It lived in the way she double-checked locks, in how she lowered her voice when discussing certain names, in the way she flinched at unexpected knocks. As a child, I thought all mothers were like that. As an adult, I knew better, but I never pressed her. Some silences feel inherited. After the funeral, when the house emptied and night settled in, I wandered from room to room like a guest who had overstayed his welcome. Her bedroom was neat, the bed made too perfectly. On the nightstand sat her phone. That's when I saw it. One unread voicemail. From her. Dated 2 days before she died. I picked up the phone, my hands sweating. My thumb hovered over the screen, then pulled away. Not yet, I told myself. Tomorrow. Or the day after. There would be time. There wasn't. I returned to my life carrying grief like an extra limb. Work resumed. People stopped asking how I was. The voicemail remained untouched, like a locked door inside me. At night, I dreamed of my mother standing in the kitchen, calling my name, her voice just out of reach. 3 years passed. Then, one night, my phone rang from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Almost. Hello. My voice sounded older than I felt. There was a pause. Breathing on the other end. Then a man spoke, his voice low, careful. You don't know me, he said. But I knew your mother. Every muscle in my body tightened. I'm sorry to call so late, he continued. My name is Kareem, and there are things she wanted you to know. The room felt suddenly airless. I sat down hard on the couch. She talked about you often, Kareem said. Especially toward the end. My mouth went dry. Who are you? He exhaled slowly. Someone who failed her. Someone trying to make it right. Something in his tone cut through me, sharp and familiar. Guilt recognizes guilt. She left something with me, he said. Instructions. She said if anything happened to her, I was to contact you. But only after time had passed. Why wait? I asked. Because she knew you wouldn't listen before you were ready, he replied gently. And because she hoped none of this would be necessary. My mind raced. Necessary for what? For the truth, he said. Silence stretched between us. I don't understand, I whispered. You will, Kareem said. But first, you need to listen to the voicemail she left you. My breath caught. How do you know about that? She told me, he said. She knew you'd avoid it. She was afraid of that. Anger flared, sudden and hot. You don't know me. I know you better than you think, he replied. Because she loved you more than anything, and love leaves clues. He gave me an address. Not far from my city. A storage facility. Go there after you've listened, he said. Unit 317. And bring the phone. The line went dead. I sat in the dark long after, my heart pounding. Part of me wanted to throw the phone across the room, to pretend none of this was happening. But another part, quieter and stronger, knew there was no turning back. That night, I finally pressed play. Her voice filled the room, softer than I remembered, edged with fatigue. My love, she said. If you're hearing this, it means I wasn't brave enough to say these things to your face. Tears blurred my vision instantly. I'm so sorry, she continued. For the fear I passed on to you. For the questions I never answered. She paused, breathing uneven. There are people who will tell you I was weak. That I worried too much. They are wrong. Fear kept you alive. Why tell me now? I typed. Because I'm dying, the reply came. And because you deserve to know who you really are. Another video followed. This time, Sarah was standing outside, the city behind her. The wind tugged at her coat. Your father wasn't a coward, she said. He was a whistleblower. He uncovered financial crimes tied to people who don't forgive easily. When he refused to disappear quietly, they made sure he did. I felt a sharp ache behind my eyes. Your mother helped him, Sarah went on. After he vanished, they turned their attention to her. She held on as long as she could. But fear does terrible things to a person's mind. I remembered the last argument we'd had. I'd accused her of hiding things from me. Of treating me like a child. She'd cried silently, her shoulders shaking. I'd stormed out, convinced I was right. I should have protected her, Sarah said. Instead, I stayed quiet. I told myself silence was safer. It wasn't. The camera shifted, revealing a small USB drive in her hand. Everything is here, she said. Documents. Names. Proof. Your mother kept copies for you, just in case. My phone slipped from my grip, landing softly on the bed. I covered my face, the weight of regret crushing my chest. All the words I hadn't said. All the forgiveness I'd postponed. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching the city breathe, replaying the videos until the sun began to rise. In the morning, I went to my mother's old closet. I hadn't opened it in years. The smell of her perfume lingered faintly, making my throat tighten. Behind a stack of folded scarves, taped carefully to the back panel, was a small envelope. Inside was the USB drive. My hands shook as I plugged it into my laptop. Files opened one by one. Emails, audio recordings, scanned documents. My father's voice, steady and determined, speaking about corruption and threats. My mother's voice, softer, full of fear and love, talking about me. If anything happens, she said in one recording, tell Adam that every breath I took was for him. I broke down then, sobbing into my hands, the sound raw and unfiltered. Over the next weeks, my life transformed into something unrecognizable. Journalists got involved. Lawyers. People who had been waiting for years to see the truth surface. There were warnings. Anonymous calls. A car that followed me for 3 days straight. Fear walked beside me constantly. But so did a strange, quiet strength. Sarah sent one final message. I won't be here to see the end of this. But I believe in you. A month later, the story broke wide open. Arrests followed. Names fell from pedestals. The narrative shifted. On a cool evening, I stood at my mother's grave, the sky painted in soft oranges and purples. The air smelled of damp earth and flowers. I know now, I whispered. I'm sorry it took me so long.